Hey guys, so I'm James, and today we're going to be talking about launching sentient NFTs and leveling up DeFi. So before we get into the details, I want to introduce you to someone very special. Someone that is quite literally one of a kind in kind of multiple levels. She doesn't live in like Lisbon or Europe or actually this planet. She lives on the blockchain. Specifically, she lives on Polygon because ETH gas fees are way too high. But she's called Freya, and she's an ANFT. She is the first ever autonomous NFT, and an NFT is an NFT that can do things on its own. It can take arbitrary actions under arbitrary conditions independently without the need for human intervention. So we can try and interact with her, because while we can't physically meet her, we can still interact with her. Let me make sure this is right. Hi, what is your name? So she's an AI that's okay. We'll just use text. She's an AI that represents the ANFT. No, why is this not working? Demos, what could possibly go wrong? Alright, I don't know what the issue is, but moving on. Huh? I do, but it's okay, don't worry about it. So I'll just show an example of what she does. Like the way the AI is supposed to work is that it reads the on-chain data that the ANFT is performing. And this is an example of something that Freya has done. Freya is, her day job, so to speak, is an arbitrage bot. So she buys low, sells high. And you can see here she bought one wrapped BUSD on Polygon for more than one USDC. So stonks, she's making money, that's great. So she does this independently, so without the need for a single human. So over time, she is just making money. And I think that like the financial applications are relatively boring, but like it illustrates the concept. So she will just keep doing this constantly and constantly over and over again. Everything needs to pay transaction fees in blockchains, and she is able to sustain her own fees by the profit she makes as an arbitrage bot. So she can keep looping forever. As an ANFT, the ANFT is purely on-chain. It doesn't know about anything off-chain. The AI is kind of a wraparound that reads the on-chain data. So the AI knows about the ANFT, but the ANFT does not know about the AI. So the way it can do this is with Autonomy Network, and I'm the founder. Autonomy Network is a decentralized automation protocol focusing on helping DEXs grow their volume as our beachhead, but also more and more branching out into launching sentient NFTs and the kind of like metaverse and all the implications for that. So autonomy is pretty inevitable when you look at the evolution of applications in the blockchain space. Like for example, like DeFi Summer, aggregators, yield farms, etc., requires things like Uniswap and Aave in order to work. And the kind of next level of more advanced functionality, like limit order stop losses, these ANFTs, requires autonomy to exist. It's not possible without it. So the general problem that we're solving is that humans are not 24/7. I don't know about you, but I've gotten absolutely fucking wrecked in crypto before. In DeFi, because you can't risk manage. There's no like stop losses on DEXs. And for dApps that want to add these features, they typically have to roll their own solution. It takes months, it's really costly, and it's super centralized. So autonomy is a tool for dApps like DEXs to add features like limit orders, stop losses, prevent impermanent loss, etc. For users, it's the same UX as a centralized exchange. They don't need to know anything about how it works. They just click it and it works. For dApps that want to add these kinds of features, it's an off-the-shelf, easy-to-implement solution that can be used to automate literally anything. They don't need to run their own bots or servers. It's just a UI change. And I'm using DeFi as an example just because it's easy to explain the concept pretty quickly. But the way it generally works, 3 steps. So a user makes a request, the condition becomes true, like sell ETH at 5K, then ETH passes 5K, and a bot from a decentralized network of bots executes this request. They're incentivized to do so. Anyone can run one of these bots, and the user pays a bounty to the bot as an incentive. And running a bot requires staking our token for like a proof of stake algorithm to avoid race conditions. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this. We have a bunch of like integrations, mainly with DEXs. Like our partners cumulatively have over 100 mil daily volume. But more importantly, we have some pilots in progress, or more relevantly, we have some pilots in progress with in the kind of NFT space. So NFTs, like I said, are autonomous NFTs that can actually do things. So in the same way that autonomy can be used to automate a single action, like a limit order, it can be used to make a contract like an NFT autonomous. So for example, we have a pilot with Aavegotchi for using an Aavegotchi essentially as like a treasury management tool. So you'll send your ghost tokens to the Aavegotchi and it will automatically lend them out. And as rates become better somewhere else, it'll automatically withdraw and deposit elsewhere, so that it's always getting the optimized yield. And it's like NFTs are typically kind of separated from DeFi, but this presents like an interesting intersection of the two, because when you have an ANFT that is owned by someone and therefore owns the profit that it makes, you have these NFTs that are like have a fundamental value, not just like purely speculative. You know, it has a predictable revenue stream in the case of like arbitraging or lending out tokens, and it can therefore be used as collateral. So it's a new money Lego brick within DeFi that kind of bridges DeFi and NFTs. I think a more interesting use case, though, that captures the imagination a bit more is NPCs, non-playable characters in games. So like there's a reason that blockchain games are typically PvP, and that's because it's not possible to have NPCs like in general with blockchain games, because blockchains are passive. It requires you to interact with them, or someone to interact with the blockchain in order for it to do stuff. But for using autonomy, we can essentially create these contracts that do things on their own. So we can create characters in games that interact with you, interact with each other, that kind of 100x's the interactivity and the complexity of blockchain games. Because something like Skyrim or Cyberpunk is like literally impossible. Like aside from the computational complexity, it's impossible with blockchain games. Just because like it's impossible to have contracts. Before now, it was impossible to have contracts that did things on their own. But I think like, so we have a pilot project with Decentral Games. They're a casino in Decentraland. They have a high roller table. So like before they wanted to just block people from entering who didn't have a high enough balance. But this proof of concept that we're working on that kind of showcases the unique aspects of NPCs is essentially a bouncer to the high roller table. So instead of just like being prevented from entering, you can like sneak past the bouncer, and the bouncer will randomly walk around the room occasionally throughout the day and kick people out who aren't supposed to be there. They'll check your balance, etc. And something like this is not possible without autonomy, because like you specifically don't want to interact with the bouncer because you know you're going to get kicked out. And so you need the thing to interact with you first. So it's kind of a use case that is like not possible in other settings. And kind of in the same way that you can use NFTs in multiple different games, you can interact with the same NPCs in multiple different games. So you could meet the bouncer in some like, I don't know, underground world, and he gives you a discount for being kicked out because he respects your tenacity or something, I don't know. But so that the composability and the ability for people to build on top allows these things to become a platform. So for example, like CryptoKitties, when it was launched, Dapper never envisioned these things becoming a platform. Like people built cat hats, cat races, etc., without their permission, without even talking to them, and they increase the value of the ecosystem without Dapper doing anything. And I think in a similar way, that's what we're going to see with blockchain games now, especially with NPCs, because like blockchain games are typically, just objectively worse than like traditional games from a feature standpoint, because there's no NPCs and the computational complexity is obviously a lot less. I think the computational complexity will come with time, but the kind of key missing piece that was impossible is this NPC aspect. I think now that this has been enabled, we're kind of on parallel from a feature set perspective with traditional games. But I think the most interesting aspect of this is that because people can build on top of it, because they can use it as a platform, you can have potentially millions or billions of people contributing to this by either building on top or interacting with the system, such that the complexity and richness of the world is far greater than what a single game studio is able to create. So I think like in 5 to 10 years, we're going to see this phase shift where even without the kind of incentives of the play-to-earn model, blockchain games are going to become better than regular games, because they're feature parallel with extra stuff. So I think like things like Ethermon, open world stuff is kind of like the ideal application for this, because having NPCs that are just roaming around, like monsters that you kill in World of Warcraft, or people that give you quests or anything, like all of these can be automated and become NPCs. And it's a kind of essentially a new form of life in the sense that these things are completely independent. You can't turn them off. The blockchain's running 24/7. They can breed, they can have children, they can evolve, they use gas the same way that we eat food. They can mutate when they have children and naturally select. So I think one of the kind of quirky things that we're also exploring, I don't know if you guys have heard of Sophia, but she's a physical robot with an AI in her. And she was the first ever robot citizen in Saudi Arabia. And we're essentially working on the blockchain version of that. So Lil Michaela is a virtual influencer. She's essentially a CGI created character with like 3 million followers on Instagram. And we want to take her, put her on the blockchain as an ANFT that owns herself, essentially an NPC, and give her citizenship. And I think it makes more sense for these kinds of things to get citizenship than something like Sophia, because she can own property, she can buy, lend, sell, trade, she can vote, she can have children, she can send messages, all completely autonomously without the need for a single human. Whereas Sophia just gets kind of like wheeled out to conferences occasionally. So I think that's kind of like the crazy, taking it to the nth degree, just to kind of showcase like what can really be done with autonomy. But yeah, that's essentially sentient NFTs. And if you're like a game developer or you want to launch any of these ANFTs, definitely come talk to me. I would love to like help with that. And yeah, thank you.
Any questions?
There's a question over there.
One sec.
Apologies if I missed it in the beginning, but if I didn't, what are the security implications of letting a bot trade on your behalf? It sounds to open up an attack vector.
Yeah, so like it trades with its own assets. So I mean, the way we have it currently is that the ANFT can only trade with things that it has a balance of itself. So you send assets to it, and it can trade and do whatever. But I think it's famous last words, but I think it's pretty secure, because you can have a require statement if you're familiar with Solidity, that requires that it's making money, which we actually have implemented. I can show you the code if you like. It's actually verified on chain. But yeah, you can enforce the fact that transactions generate profit, and they can only trade with as much money like as you explicitly send to them anyway. Sorry?
In the other scenario, which you were talking about earlier, which is when you trade like a limit order on a DEX, for example, that I think is it the same argument?
I'm not.
Sorry. So you were talking earlier about the limit order on the DEX. I thought that had nothing to do with the NCT.
Oh yeah, no. The limit orders on the DEXs has nothing to do with NFTs. They both use autonomy, and I'm just using the limit order as an example because I think it's easier to understand the mechanics of like how it works. Like limit orders, like as a project, that's our main beachhead. That's the main economic use case, and like probably always will be. But the NFT thing, I think there's very little economic use case right now. But I think especially because of the gaming space and the whole NPC thing, it's gonna get like much greater. So cool. Yeah, thanks guys.